On this episode, Ed gives us some insight into what it's like being a foreigner teaching political science in Thailand.
So if you're curious how foreigners navigate the tricky Thai political landscape when talking to Thai people, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 and never left because I traded my passport for a wicked plate of mango and sticky rice.
All right. And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 17 years ago, fell in love with the sun, beautiful blue skies, and crystal clean air of Bangkok until now.
You're in the wrong place, man.
Well, I've been in the right place until recently.
Yeah.
All right. We want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, William Mix, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after we're done talking about what it's like for a Westerner, me, to teach political science in Thailand, to hear why Will is either the best guy or the worst guy to go drinking with. And you can learn more about becoming a patron on our website. And of course, one of the cool things our patrons get is an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we talk about all kinds of stuff. We just finished actually recording this week's bonus show, and we covered a lot of ground, from discussions on the citizenship of third culture kids, including Greg himself, to a continuation of the discussion of recent refugee Rahaf Mohammed, to the difference between Japanese culture and Thai culture. And we even discussed a plan to fight Bangkok's air pollution with water spraying drones. For real. We're not making this up.
We were all over the place on that one. We got into it.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, a few episodes back on the bonus show, patrons get the bonus show. Regular listeners, unfortunately, do not. But what we were discussing, we were talking about the river, actually. And we were discussing the plan by the powers that be to quadruple the number of people who use the river every day. And part of the plan is that they are going to buy large catamarans for tours. And the catamarans, if you don't know, are those two-hulled boats that sort of have the middle part that sits above the water. And that also led into a discussion about all kinds of river questions, including a talk about long-tail boats. And Ed and I were both kind of wondering, like, why do they have to be so damn long and so damn loud? Like, do they need that long propeller off the back? It was a pretty interesting discussion. And obviously neither Ed nor I are marine biologists or aquadynamicologists or whatever you call it, so we really didn't know. But our buddy Cody, who's a listener of the show, he wrote in and he gave us some aquadynamic advice. And he said, I'm getting the following information from my own research as well as my aunt and uncle, who are 20 years retired U.S. Coast Guard and have lived on boats their entire lives. So, first of all, we were talking about the long-tail boats and why they have to be so long and narrow. Like, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, right? But he said the boats are long because the middle sections of a boat basically get a free ride when calculating the resistance and effort in propelling the boat through the water. So it actually is more aquadynamic.
Interesting.
Yeah. And to the second point that we were saying, why are they using catamarans, these giant catamarans, to ferry people around? And he said catamarans usually cost a bit more due to their complexity to build, but offer advantages in speed and size for cargo that requires a lot of room, but doesn't have substantial weight, i.e. people. So there you go.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I really had no idea what the reason for using catamarans would be, but I guess now I know.
Yeah, it seems like a waste. But hey, man, if they're good enough for Kevin Costner in Waterworld, it's good enough for Bangkok, I say.
There's no doubt about that.
So thanks, Cody, for writing in. That's really interesting. All right, well, on this episode, we are going to skirt around the edges of something that's never boring here in Thailand, which is how we adapt to political currents in the kingdom. Now, on the day we recorded this, the new election date has just been announced, and since Ed teaches political science at the university level, we thought it would be interesting to get his ideas on how things look here from an academic point of view, how he teaches these sensitive topics to his Thai students, and what his students think of all this hubbub anyway. So, just to start it off, Ed, real quick, how long have you been teaching political science?
Well, I didn't start teaching political science right away. I taught for a couple years in Thailand something unrelated to politics, but then I took a part-time job at Bangkok University, not where I teach now, but I used to teach at Bangkok University part-time, and I just taught one class there, Introduction to Political Science.
Oh, yeah.
So that was around 2003. So I so ever since then, I've either been teaching part-time political science, or then I took my full-time job at my university now, and so it's been 10 years since I did that. And I teach many classes at the university, but I do teach several political science-related subjects. So I don't know, like about 15 years, I guess, I've been teaching some aspect of poli-sci.
But you're like a political wonk going way back, right? Like that's your wheelhouse anyway.
Well, I have a law degree in the U.S., and I majored in political science, so yeah, I guess I'm a politics guy.
There you go. Well, you know what's funny about living in Bangkok is that you sort of measure how long you've been here by how many coups you've lived through. You know, it's like, you know, a real old timer's been like, ooh, yeah, I've been here through 4 coups, you know, and you're like, ooh, he's got 4 medals on his lapel or something, you know.
That's right. That is funny. That's a good in joke for expats.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, like this show is not about Thai politics. We're not going to go there. We're not going to go that deep. Instead, Greg was just curious what it was like for me, being a Westerner, someone who grew up in a democracy, obviously, and what it's like to live here, experience these coups, and then live for many years under a military dictatorship, which is something, you know, if you told me when I was 30 that I was going to spend many years of my life living under military dictatorship, I would have told you that you were crazy, like a crazy person.
Right.
You know, and little did I know I would live in a country that's not really a democracy for a long time. I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit what it's like being in a university, teaching politics in the middle of like potentially crisis situations or coups and things like that. And it's funny, over the years, I've really changed and kind of evolved. Like when I first got here and I didn't know anything about Thai politics, I just found Thai politics kind of fascinating, and I tried to read up on it. I remember in 2000, I got a copy of the Thai Constitution in English, the 97 Constitution, and so I was reading the Thai Constitution, just trying to figure out what was going on.
Nerd!
Well, I was a lawyer and someone interested in politics.
I'm just kidding. That's actually really admirable. That's pretty cool.
No, I was really curious about the Thai Constitution, and the 97 Constitution is considered by many people to be one of the best ones, and so that's the one that I look to as like a high watermark. But it's funny, when I started teaching political science at Bangkok University, I in general completely avoided Thai politics because I really felt like I didn't know enough about it. I wasn't an expert in it, and I still had that kind of feeling of I'd only been in Thailand a few years, and I just felt like I was kind of a guest in the country, and I didn't want to be one of those obnoxious foreigners who pontificates to Thai people about Thai politics.
Right, one of those barstool experts who doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's like, let me tell you what the problem is, you know.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's the exact guy I did not want to be. And even though I was in a university setting, I was teaching a general political science course, and it wasn't my job to teach Thai politics. That would be absurd. I'm not a Thai studies person. I didn't have a background in Thai studies. I don't speak Thai. So, and back then, before 2006, like Thailand was democratic. So Thaksin got elected, and then Thaksin got reelected. So Thai politics was interesting, but it wasn't like turbulent in my early days here. So there was no need for me to really talk about it.
Right. Yeah, me too. And I remember when I first got here in 2001, it was only recently that Thaksin was on the cover of Time magazine as like, you know, I think the headline was something like, "Is this the face of Asia's new democracy?" or something like that. Obviously that didn't last too long. But yeah, it was a sort of a more, this sounds stupid, but a more innocent time. And I know there have been plenty of coups before you and I are even around. But it just seemed sort of, I don't know, it just seemed like things seemed pretty stable at the time.
Well, I think that's a good way to put it. Even though I generally avoided Thai politics, I wanted to. So I remember in one of my lectures at Bangkok University, this would have been 2004 or something like that. I had a short segment on Thai political history, and I had done some reading, and there's a very common way to talk about Thai politics, and I certainly did not coin this term, and I'm not sure who did, but people often talk about the vicious cycle of Thai politics. And I remember throwing this into one of my lectures, and the basic idea was that over and over again, Thailand goes through these repetitive cycles. And the cycle basically involves a period of time that is relatively stable, but not totally democratic. Ooh. So it might be semi-democracy, military rule like we're in right now. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is Thai people begin to protest or push for real democracy. Then Thailand will have an election. The country will become mostly democratic or apparently democratic. So that's kind of like stage 2. And stage 3 is there's some type of crisis that threatens stability. And there's over the years there's been a variety of different crises, but there's some crises that destabilizes the system, and then step 4 is the military steps back in to reassert stability, and the country becomes undemocratic. So it basically goes through the, cycles like that, and now it's done. Now Thailand has done it like 12 times or something like that.
The analogy I always use is like when you go on a family trip and the kids are in the back seat behaving for a while, and then they start acting up, and one of the parents reaches back with their arms and smacks them around a little bit, and then everyone's quiet, drives along nicely for a while until they act up again and they need to get smacked around again. So that's kind of what it's like. But it's funny when you come from a democracy and come from a Western education, growing up, learning about all this stuff, when we hear words like coup and military dictatorship and tanks and things like that, we think of terrible things, bloodshed, death, riots and stuff like that. And that stuff has certainly happened. But for the 2006 coup and the 2014 coup, there was none of that. It was just sort of like, hey, we're taking over. All right, done. Obviously, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but
the point I was going to make is that I taught this cycle, that famous vicious cycle of Thai politics. But I remember specifically in my lecture, I explained that we had broken out of the cycle because Thaksin was elected. He was prime minister for 4 years, and then he was re-elected. And that was the first time in Thai history that there had been 2 elections in a row.
Right. Yeah.
And I was explaining to my students how this will establish a precedent where the government changes through democratic means. And so I stood up in front of, my class was big. It was about 150 students. And I explained how the vicious cycle of Thai politics had been broken.
These kids are like, mid-30s family people now. And they're like talking, oh, man, I remember this one dumbass teacher I had way back in the day.
That's right.
He was so optimistic. He was such a noob.
Yeah, he thought he understood Thailand. That's right. For sure. I mean, I have no idea. Like, my students rarely give me feedback on the content. In general, the problem generally with Thai students is they don't care about politics. It's like that. That's the general problem. But I'm going to guess that most of my students would have agreed with that. Because at that point, those young people had never seen a coup because the last coup was in '91. Right. So they had not experienced a coup before, and so I think they would have been on board with my idea that like coups were a thing of the past. This was a common, especially when Thaksin got reelected. Like his reelection in 2004 was a major event because it had never happened before. Like 2 democratic elections in a row. Yeah. It's not that no one predicted another coup. I mean, Thaksin's second term was very controversial. So right away in his second term, things started to go wrong, and there were signs. And the 2006 coup was not completely unexpected. There were long timers who were saying, "Yep, here we go again." Right. But for me, I was shocked in 2006 and couldn't believe it. When I woke up in the morning and saw the headline of the Bangkok Post, and it just said "coup d'état" was just the headline. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I really felt like I was as an American who had never really lived overseas before, and as someone who studied politics, the idea that I was living in a country where there was a coup d'etat going on live in the streets, I was in a state of shock.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. And I know you have previously told your story of what it's like to live through a coup.
Right. Evo and I did a whole show called Thailand Memories Living Through a Coup, and that was episode 2.13.
Yeah.
Episode 13 of the second season. So it was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, but in 2006, 2014 was the coup itself was not particularly dangerous. There were protests and things before that were dangerous, but the 2006 coup, it also ended up not being dangerous, and there was no bloodshed. But I think there was a lot of uncertainty about it because there hadn't been a coup in a while, and because, like I said, because Thaksin had gotten reelected, his government had more legitimacy, and so I think there was a real fear and uncertainty in 2006. Like people really avoided the streets. Like people were off the streets. There were these worries that part of the military was going to be loyal to Thaksin, and so there was genuine worries that there was going to be an actual battle. It did not come to pass, but it was. I don't want to say it's scary. I don't want to over dramatize it, but it was kind of like potentially scary, where no one knew what was going to happen, and I was trying to follow the press, and everyone was kind of waiting to see if actual fighting was going to break out.
Yeah. It was a really uncertain time. No one knew what was going to happen next.
But what changed for me? So after 2006, I obviously realized I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to Thai politics. Like after 2006, I was like, wow, like this is so different from the States. It's so different from the West. And I decided like just to stay out of it. Like, I think most foreigners, we just kind of stay out of it. It's really, even though we live here, it's not really our business, right?
Right.
In a way, because we live here legally, you could make an argument that it kind of should be our business. But the bottom line is just the way Thailand works and the way Thai people are. It's really not our business. Like, we're still guests here. Even if we've been here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we're still foreigners. And, the fact that we don't speak Thai well, and it's just Thai people just don't welcome foreigners' opinions on Thai politics.
Yeah, fair enough. So you went through a transition where you sort of didn't care about it to thinking that you now cared about it and got really into it.
Well, that happened later. Yeah. So what happened after 2006 is I was just, it wasn't even so much that I didn't care about it. I actually kept reading about it, but I just decided, like, academically and intellectually, I just wasn't qualified to even say anything, and so I kind of went through this period where I just didn't talk about Thai politics at all in class.
Right.
I switched universities. I started teaching full time, and I just stayed out of Thai politics. So I'm teaching mostly American government classes. I'm really a professor of American studies. So my job is to explain the United States to Thai people. Like, my job isn't to explain Thailand to anybody.
Fair enough.
I just completely kind of stayed out of it. But after 2006, as you know, like, even though we were under a military government for a while, and then eventually we had new elections, things were not stable. So we had red shirt protests, yellow shirt protests, the Bangkok shutdown. We had arson attacks. There was violence. There was serious, protests that got seriously violent, and basically the lead up to the 2014 coup, that lead up, the Bangkok shutdown led by the yellow shirts, for some reason, I just kind of snapped. I don't know why.
Really?
I think foreigners go through phases like this where I think we distance ourselves from it, but then sometimes we just get sucked in. It's like to some issue or whatever it is. It's like, because we live here.
That's what's funny is that I've known you for 12 years now ish, and in the course of the podcast, I'm still finding out cool things about our relationship, because I had the exact opposite experience. I used to be really into this stuff, and it used to bother me, and I used to get worked up about it. And I think I've mentioned it on the show before. It was in sometime in the past 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years, I just reached the point where I was like, you know what, the hell with it. I don't care. It's none of my business. I can't influence outcomes at all. I have no hand in how this plays out. It's a Thai issue, and Thais will figure it out. And I just sort of dropped it. It was the most Buddhist thing I've ever done, and I just sort of stopped caring, which is the opposite of you.
Well, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. That's certainly probably a better route to sanity. So that was I think that was a sane choice. But for me, part of the problem was, I'm standing there in class and I'm teaching political concepts. Like, there's a concept in political science just called political legitimacy.
Okay.
Political justification. And it's just, how do governments justify their power? And there's all kinds of theories, and it's an old academic subject. But it just became ridiculous that I was standing up in class teaching about political legitimacy when out the window there was a political legitimacy crisis going on in the streets. It's like, it just seemed I just started to feel fake as a professor, not talking about something that's directly relevant to what I'm teaching that's happening like right outside the window.
That's interesting.
There were actual protests at my university. How could I not talk about it? So basically what happened, and this happened before the 2014 coup, the lead up to the coup, I just snapped. And I even have a Facebook post that I can go way back to on Facebook where I just say on Facebook to all my students, I just say on there, I have snapped. I just say I've snapped, and I can't not talk about what's going on in Thai politics anymore. And I just explain to my students, like, I'm going to tell you what I think about this. Of course, you don't have to take my word for it, but I can go back to that post, and I just laid out everything I thought about these people are right, these people are wrong, this guy's ridiculous, you should listen to this person. And I just completely switched. And from that point on, for the last 4 years in class, I just tell students exactly what I think about everything in Thai politics.
That's potentially dangerous, though, man, don't you think?
Well, I'm smart. I don't know about smart is the right word, but I'm careful. I'm careful not to break the law. But I got to be honest. I'm just pretty outspoken. I just say, this is ridiculous. This is stupid. Don't believe this person. Like, these are the people you should be listening to. And of course, my students understand that. Like, they don't have to accept my opinion. Of course, I mean, I teach them all the time. Like, I joke with my students, if they say they believe something because I believe it, then they fail.
Right. Have you ever faced any pushback or backlash from students or the management of your university?
Well, it's interesting you ask. The short answer is some, but not much. So during the middle of the 2014 crisis, like just after the coup, my university decided to do a panel discussion on it. And I was asked to be on the panel. And my boss basically asked me to not be on it. She was like, I heard you got invited to be on this panel. Can you say no? And like I said, I had recently in the last year just snapped. And like I would have, prior to that, I would have said, hey, I don't want to do that. Why do I? But I was just like, no, I'm doing it. And so she asked me not to do it, but I was just all in at that point. I just had turned the corner where like I wanted to say what I thought about what was going on. So I was on this panel. The panel was foreigners' perspectives on the Thai crisis. So it was meant to be foreigners. So it was me, an Italian guy, and a German guy.
Okay.
And it was a little bit weird because when I got to the event, which I assumed was going to be like 20 students and a few professors, it was packed, and there were 3 TV stations there.
Oh, no way.
Including representatives of the Thai army.
Oh, nice.
So the military showed up at the event. Jeez. Okay. And so I'm thinking like, oh God, maybe this was a huge mistake. Like this is going to get me deported or something like that. So I went to the guy who organized it, who was a professor in the economics department. And I said, hey, like, do I need to worry here? Like the military's here. And I remember what he said. It was kind of funny. He said, these army guys, they can't speak English. Okay. And he said, so don't use the prime minister's name So Prayut, the current prime minister, who's still the prime minister, he said, don't use General Prayut's name. And he said, don't use the letters NCPO. NCPO are the official letters of like the military government. He goes, just don't use the name Prayut, don't use the name NCPO. But other than that, they won't have any idea what you're talking about.
Nice.
Yeah, and so basically that's what I did. I mean, I was careful what I said, but I didn't mention Prayut's name. I didn't mention the NCPO, but the military had a video guy there. So everything I said got videotaped by the military.
So that speech is still on some tape in some basement somewhere.
It is. And then on top of that, the military came around with this form for me to fill out about like who I was and where I lived and all that kind of stuff. And so I basically I filled out the form with my correct name, but then I just put my address at the university. I mean, obviously they can just easily find out who I am from my passport and stuff like that.
Right.
But like I said, I didn't. I did say what I thought, but I was polite. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't like rude or insulting. I just said what I thought, and didn't break any laws at the time. I just said why I thought the coup was a mistake. Gave my honest opinion and explained it in this academic setting, and that was probably It might have been late 2014 or early 2015, and there was never any repercussions after that. However, I did have some pushback on Facebook from some of my students who disagreed with me. So again, we're not going to get into the actual issue, but since I was expressing my opinion, in some ways I was kind of choosing a side in the crisis. And even though most students don't care about Thai politics, some of them do, like at least a few do. And so there was a student who was very critical of me on Facebook and basically made this classic argument that foreigners don't understand Thailand.
Yes, the classic argument. Makes me rage.
Yeah, like anytime foreigners express their opinion on Thai politics, we're told, "Farang Mai Khao Chai." We don't understand. And the bottom line is, what I said to the student and what I tell every Thai person who tells me I don't understand, I say, you might be right. Tell me what I don't understand then.
No, you can't understand.
Yeah, teach me about Thailand. Explain to me what I don't understand, which of course they can never do.
Right.
So in my opinion, when Thai people say Farang Mai Khao Chai, what they're saying is, I disagree with you, but I can't explain why.
Yeah, I would take it a step further and say I think they're saying I don't know how to articulate my thoughts properly, and I'm out of arguments. So they're basically flipping over the chessboard at that time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But anyway, this student, it didn't end up being a big deal, but we had this kind of Facebook tiff, so to speak, and then I went to her Facebook page, and she was posting all this stuff in Thai on her Facebook page. So I just had my wife. I'm like, hey, what is this student saying in Thai? And basically my wife read it and she started laughing. And I'm like, what? And she goes, well, she's talking about a professor she knows who she thinks should be deported.
Nice.
But luckily I could see there, and I asked my wife, she didn't name me, but I'm sure other students could figure out who she was talking about.
That's interesting. Well, we were talking earlier quickly about how we come from a democratic country, and we learn about the word coup and how it's bad, and what it leads to. But it's strange being here for so long that we sort of get used to it. Like right now, Thailand is a military dictatorship, but it's day to day. It's not much different from when there was a democracy or a democratically elected government. So it's kind of a weird place to be, where as a foreigner you're raised thinking democracy is like the way to go, and then one day you're living in a military dictatorship and you're like, yeah, things are all right, But I wonder how much of that is apathy and how much of it is just sort of, acceptance with the way things are.
I think that is a great topic. Again, we could do a whole nother show about that.
Yeah,
I think what it reminds me of. It reminds me of when I flew to Vietnam for the first time, and I stepped off the plane, and I knew Vietnam was a communist country. And when I got off the plane, I expected the country to smell differently. I was just like,
yeah, that's funny. I had the same feeling when I went to China for my first time in a communist country. I was like, man, there's going to be people on the streets with machine guns. Like, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah. So I think it's a good lesson. It is a good lesson for Westerners to realize that the value of democracy, I think, is not necessarily in like peace or stability. I mean, obviously, I'm a pro-democracy. I think democracy is a human right. I think democracy is appropriate for every single country on the planet, and I can explain why at great length. But I do think it's true that many countries, such as Thailand, they at least there's a segment of the Thai population that they don't see the real advantage in democracy, and if they're not getting what they want, they don't really have a problem being undemocratic, at least for a while. In other words, they think of democracy as something that is, if it's working, fine, that's great, but if it's not, we can take a non-democratic path, and it's not the end of the world. It's just countries with different histories. There's just a lot of people that don't see what's so special or magical about democracy.
I think that offers some insight into Thai culture, and perhaps a little element of Buddhism too, where it's sort of the Mai Pen Rai, like, hey man, it is what it is. What are you gonna do? You gotta everyone's got to work, everyone's got to make money, everyone's got to go to school, whatever, and they just get on with it. Which I think in the West we kind of lack a little bit of that outlook, and I think we might benefit from having it. The sort of Mai Pen Rai of it all.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like everything in Thailand, I think there's a good and bad side to it, and in Mai Pen Rai, I think it does reduce conflict in a lot of ways, but it also allows factions to get away with stuff. So in the case of Thai politics, I personally don't think Mai Pen Rai is good for Thailand. And like I said, we're going to keep it light tonight. We're not going to get into the issue itself, but I'll just say this. Mostly I have to teach about the West. So, I spend most of my time trying to explain America to Thai people. But, when I feel that something happening in Thailand is relevant, I do now, and I still do it today, is I just tell them directly what I think. And so they can do whatever they want. If they want to ignore my opinion because I'm a foreigner, my students, of course, have that right to do that.
If it was back in the States, it'd be like some hippie teacher's putting weird ideas into my kid's head. We got to get him out of there.
That's right. Except now I'm a weird foreigner.
Well, one last question before we head out then. I'm just sort of in the back of my mind, but has one of your students ever said anything to you that has really surprised or shocked you, either negatively or positively, about politics, either in Thailand or America? I'm just curious what goes on inside the mind of a university student in Thailand when they think about politics.
Well, in terms of shocked, yeah. I mean, sometimes my students shock me. I mean, I see my students' opinions all the time because my students have to write answers on exams. So I'm reading exams all the time, like way too much time. And usually on exams, my students, even the good ones, are really just spitting back stuff that I mentioned or something from the textbook. So if my students can even remember my lectures or remember the textbook, to me, I usually give them a B. So in that case, it's not a shock. Like usually when I'm reading the exam, I hear my voice, and that's worth something. It's not real learning, but it's something. But then it's not that rare that I'm reading either an exam or talking to a student outside of class where I'm like, wow, that's interesting or insightful. It does happen. So I am surprised.
That's good, I guess. It's good when a university professor is still sometimes shocked or surprised by his students. So.
Oh, for sure, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, both in positive and negative ways.
Yeah.
Like occasionally, my students just say something shockingly negative. Just to end this discussion, to give you just a silly example, once in class we were discussing the problems in the Thai South, the kind of Muslim insurgency down there, and one guy just raised his hand, and I'm like, what do you think? And he goes, I think we should just kill them all.
Jesus Christ.
And I was like, oh, I see.
Yeah. Thanks,
Somchai. So my students do sometimes shock me, both in positive and negative ways.
Security gets Somchai in the back row.
That's right.
Interesting. All right, well, let's get into some love, loathe, or leave. And that's where one of us surprises the other guy with a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or hate so much it makes us want to leave forever. This week, it's back over to you, man. What do you got?
Okay, so picture this. I know this has happened to you. You're in a bar or restaurant. Outside, it's hot out, And so they turn on the misters, and droplets of water like mist come raining down upon you. Good or bad?
Well, this is related to what we were talking about on the bonus show about the pollution and the drones spraying misting stuff in the air. You know what? I think there's only a very small amount of great inventions in the history of mankind. The wheel, internal combustion engine, electricity, the internet, and fan misters. I think they're...
So you like the fan misters?
Love the fan. Beyond love. I think they're fantastic. And I think a lot of people maybe don't like them because it leaves your clothes slightly wet, and if you're sitting too close to them, then maybe you can get like a little damp on your skin. But as a husky gentleman, I'm usually got damp skin anyway, so it doesn't.
You're sweating.
Really
You're sweating all the time anyway.
No, I love them. I think they're great. I sit in the direct line of them whenever they're on.
Okay, well, I don't want to destroy this experience for you, but one reason why I don't like them that much is I read some random article, and again, I have no idea if it's really based in fact, but I read some article that said that the water that they're misting is often unclean.
Oh, jeez.
And you can get like eye infections and stuff from like the dirty water they're spraying on you.
Damn it, man.
You never thought of that, did you?
You know, ruin everything, but you're going to tell me the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus are not real next?
Dude, I'm telling you, the air, the water that they're misting on you, it might not be clean.
I guess that is something to think about. But hey, man, I've been here a long time and I'm not sick yet, so.
That's true.
Although, yeah, I never really checked where that water's coming from. It's like when you go up to Chiang Mai for Songkran and people are filling up their super soakers from the Klong. You're like, dude.
That's right.
Yeah, well, man, there's one more good thing in my life just smashed out from underneath me.
Sorry about that, dude.
I got precious few stilts I'm standing on here, Ed. Leave me in peace. I love them unless it's noticeably crappy water that they're spraying on me. Let's leave it at that.
Well, I'm going to have to go with a loathe just because I'm skeptical about the water quality.
All right.
So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to William Mix for lending us his support at the show shout-out level. And Greg, what did you find out about William?
Well, Edward, I was chatting with William, and he was saying how he's got a lot of stories from his time in Bangkok, but most of them he will, quote, take to his grave. So immediately right off the bat, I'm like, this William guy, I like the cut of his jib, you know what I mean? He sounds like an interesting guy. But he did tell me one story that makes me think he's either the best guy to go out drinking with or the worst guy to go out drinking with. And I'm going to quote from his email here. He said, I did once get into a testosterone-fueled contest/dare with a British Muay Thai fighter in a bar on Soy Cowboy one night. He was saying that he could knock down most people with his body shots. So I dared him to take a few shots on my stomach, feeling confident that I used to do kickboxing 25 years ago. Thankfully, I wasn't feeling much pain that night thanks to the cheap drinks. But for the next few weeks, my stomach and ribs were black and blue. I never did that again.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea.
Well, William seems like one of these guys that you sort of hitch your wagon to, and you just kind of follow him around for the night, and you have a hell of a night. Now, whether it goes good or bad, that's just up to the fates, I think.
That's right. Yeah, guys like that, you're right. You either have a great night or the worst night of your life.
Yeah, and I when he said he picked a British kickboxer, the only thing I think of when you talk about British people down at these red light districts is years ago I was in some little bar in Pat Pong and I wanted to go to the bathroom, so I was up there standing at the urinal, and there's one of these weird bathrooms where the guy puts a hot towel on your neck and starts massaging your shoulders while you're standing at the urinal.
Yeah, horrible.
It's creepy and gross. What you do is you turn around and say no thank you, and they leave you alone. But this one British guy stumbled in, this young kid, and this guy put a towel on his shoulder and he started massaging him, and this guy just freaked out. He had no idea what was going on, and he took the towel off his neck and he threw it in the urinal with like half full of piss and everything.
Oh wow.
And the attendant started yelling at him, and the British guy started yelling, and I got the hell out of there. So that's why I don't go around picking fights with Brits, because they come from a drinking culture and they don't shy away.
That's funny.
Yeah, William. I don't know, man. Next time you're in town, I'll tell you what. Let's tempt fate here. Next time you're in town, you and me and Ed head out to Wong's, because I've never been there, and I need some spark to guarantee something eventful.
All right, I'm in.
I think William's our guy. So thanks for the support, man. We do appreciate it. And next time you're in town, let's see what kind of trouble we can get up to.
All right. So before we wrap up, I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our lovely patrons. As you know, we don't run ads or have sponsors, so we really, really do appreciate the support we get from our patrons. If you want to learn more, just head to bangkokpodcast.com/support. And if you want to get in touch with us, it's easy. Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We are very polite, and if you write, we will answer.
If you build it, they will come.
That's right.
Yeah, you can also find us online where we post each episode and carry on conversations with our listeners. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter where I'm BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week.
See you guys.
To hear why Mitch's family is numerically destined to do great things. Actually, I gotta record that again. That's not what it's about at all. I changed it.